I oftentimes find people who get very nervous around like, well, am I just not using it right? Or like, or am I just too stupid? Like like is all the other customers smarter than me? And like, I just don't want to be, like, I'm just kind of a dodo and like nobody's ever going to be vulnerable enough to tell a vendor like, I'm not smart enough to use your product. So like, can you explain this to me? Like I'm 5 years old. Like, it's kind of an open secret that their margins are not sustainable, right? Like it's 0% margin, even negative margins, right? Now, like, I believe AI is sort of valuable in the abstract, and it's obviously something I spend a bunch of time in, but like selling dollars for 85 cents is a good business. Like that's a good way to make your revenue look really good. Kind of so where we're heading in the AI cycle. My fundamental like anxieties about it as an investor. So I think we're now in an era where the AI is sort of paradoxically the easiest thing to do, right? Like everybody can have access to work. You pay by the token through an API, like they will happily sell you. And so I think AI is now the commoditized part. Product and sales are the sort of unique differentiated part of either you will build the right thing, or you will know the thing you need to add on top of the API call that nobody else has figured out, and or you know how to sell this better than anyone else. You know how to...
First of all, thank you for listening to Unlocking Next Steps podcast, and apologies that I interrupt this episode. I promise I keep it short, but it's quite important and I need your help, please. I've been publishing these podcast conversations for 2 years now, and I see from the statistics that many of you are listening to my podcast on Spotify or Apple, and some of you are watching on YouTube. Thank you for that, and I hope you enjoyed the episode so far. I plan on making more episodes, but in order to do so, as I'm a one-man show, I would like to ask for your help, please. It doesn't cost you anything except for maybe 1 minute of your time. Please subscribe to my podcast on Apple or Spotify and subscribe to my YouTube channel. With your subscriptions, I will be able to reach more listeners, which in turn helps me get further interesting guests for you to listen to. So if you will, it's a win-win. Subscribe, and if you want, you can also leave a like or a comment, or tell me if there's anyone you want me to speak to in one of my episodes. Thank you so much for your support, and now let's start the next episode. 95% of AI experiments or pilots in companies are failing. Investments into AI are climbing to new heights almost every day. We all get asked every day at work when AI will finally be implemented in a way to take over significant work or create significant efficiencies. How does all of this fit together? How should we make sense out of this and find the right way as an HR and tech practitioner in this jungle of opposing information? I'm sure I'm not the only one confronted with this issue. So how to make sense? Let's talk to the experts on this. I was very lucky and grateful that a seasoned AI expert, practitioner, and investor found some time in his diary to talk about this with me. Welcome to another Employee Experience Labs podcast from the Munich Podcast studio. Employee Experience Labs podcasts are about HR tech, employee experience, shared services, and other interesting topics around HR at the workplace. Today's episode is an addition to our Startup and AI series we are currently running. But as I had alluded to, it is a special one. I was very lucky to get some time back with Kevin Novak, founder of Rackhouse VC. A VC firm specialized in AI investments with the aim of actively coaching AI startups to success. It's not the first time that Kevin and I have spoken on this podcast. In fact, I recommend listening to our first conversation about a year ago for some additional background and context. We took time this year to first look at what happened in the last 12 months when it comes to AI. And spoiler alert, a lot has happened. Also not much at the same time. Kevin and I also dove deep into the current capabilities of AI, specifically where agentic AI is on the hype scale, as well as what is needed to bring AI to commercial success. Let me pause here. Please see and hear for yourself. Here we go. Kevin Novak, founder and CEO, Rackhouse VC. Kevin, hello! How are you? I mean, we had a few conversations on the way. Some people might remember that we had a fantastic podcast episode around a year ago. But it's so great to have you back on here. How are you doing, sir?
Volker, thank you for the invite. It's great to be back. Life is good. It's exciting times in AI, exciting times for Rackhouse. So things are good.
And this is exactly why I am so excited to have you back on. It is, I don't know, we'll definitely get into the details there at a later stage in the conversation, but it feels from what has happened significantly more than a year than that we have talked, both in AI, but also Rackhouse. So I'm really curious to get there. But before we go there are, Kevin, I know it's difficult, but there are people who might not have seen or listened to our first episode. So before we go into the weeds, maybe a few words about you. Who is Kevin Novak?
Sure. No, happy to recap. So very quickly, I run a fund these days called Rackhouse Venture Capital. Launched the fund in 2020. We are really excited about backing founders early on who are applying AI in applications and industries all over the world. So we like to get involved early on. If you're a founder who wants to take AI out of the labs and into the warehouse, into the call center, into the workplace, and you're looking for an investor, that's my current day job. This grew out of a career about 15 years building myself in the machine learning AI space. Most famously, I was early on as the first head of data science at Uber. Had a career, but it was at Uber about 7 years. That was a big chunk of a 15-year career, always kind of early on in startups. And before that, way back in the day, I was a physicist by training. So I have always been playing around with math in one way or another.
And if I recall correctly, you have not been just a physicist?
That's right. We worked on the nuclear physics program, and I was funded through the Higgs boson project, which basically just meant that I had a really big budget for supercomputer cycles, which was it was a good opportunity to kind of hone my programming skills, right? Which came in useful as the world continued to move into machine learning and AI. Slightly lower stakes in terms of the number of servers involved, but definitely the same skill set for sure.
Amazing. And this is exactly right. This combination that you bring to the table. You have early on researched a lot and utilized, big machines, big computers. You then have worked a lot around data and AI in the early and produced AI models yourself. Now you are a VC founder and are investing in AI startups that bring great ideas to the market. So you basically have the full background, and that is exactly why I'm so happy to have you, because that background in today's world is amazing to have, and the learnings that you are ready to share and the experience that you have is really something that not many have. But there's also another thing that happened recently, right? I think you had a very exciting exit on one of your investments, right?
That's correct. Yeah. We were early on investors in a company called Windsurf. For those of your audience who don't follow the AI headlines, we were fortunate enough that the team was acquired into a combination of Google DeepMind and then Cognition for a great outcome for them. And of course, we got to participate in it as shareholders in the company. So always nice to be able to return money back to our LPs. This was sort of our first big distribution as a fund. But more importantly, very exciting for the Windsurf team as they sort of saw their entrepreneurial dreams realized as they go into the next chapter.
Yeah, indeed. It was an amazing one. I was following all of the coverage and the media around it.
Wow.
It was really exciting, and some back and forth before it landed where it landed. It was amazing, really interesting.
Yeah, the negotiation is always kind of high stakes. I've always sort of done like in the headlines on one level and behind closed doors on another. But that's Silicon Valley. That's the story as old as startups.
I can imagine. And I hope that it's just the beginning of a few other interesting ones, and I'm pretty sure it is.
Sure. I appreciate that.
Kevin, last time we talked a lot about AI fundamentals in data. It was, the early days of Gen AI still, and now like a year has passed. What has changed? If you were just to recap the last 12 months,
Sure.
what were you say were the highlights in AI from your perspective? How would you characterize the last year?
Sure. It's interesting because I would definitely say on some axes everything's different, and then in other senses like absolutely nothing has changed. And what I mean by that is sort of everything is different in the sense of if you look at where the state of the technology and the research field is, both in terms of you think a year ago we were kind of in a world where chain of thought was only sort of in its nascent angles from the perspective of models that can sort of have this sort of intermediate thinking step
Yeah.
before they deliver you a result. Um, Everybody was very worried about context windows as far as like how
Yeah.
can we get enough information to the model
Yeah.
in a really efficient way. Um, and I would say the attitude when it came to training and really even like inference compute was very much like a look, just keep throwing GPUs at the problem and data centers at the problem. And like, yeah, we got to build them, but like this is pretty deterministic.
Yeah.
In the last year, all of those mindsets have changed pretty dramatically, which is to say, um, you chain thought as manifest both in the latest models, but you look at some of the open source models. There was sort of DeepSeek R1
Yeah.
earlier
Yeah.
in the year. Uh, Chain of thought is pretty commoditized. Every model provider has it. It's sort of seen as expected, not novel.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the research community has moved on to these concepts around reinforcement learning, or sort of
Mm-hmm.
it's in the field is known as test time compute. Basically, like how do we teach models after training? How do you improve that? That's a whole different realm of mathematics.
Yeah. Yeah.
But more fundamentally, the entire mindset around scaling is much more nuanced, right? In the sense of open AI. I mean, if you read in any of these model providers, but OpenAI is certainly the most public, has acknowledged that compute is because and the lack of availability of it has become a significant bottleneck to growth, right? That they are UC efforts. They launched a project called Stargate. It was
Yeah.
probably launched about a year ago. Really didn't pick up momentum until about 6 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Where it's a combination of sort of think of it as investing cross policy, cross like business strategy, where they are literally going to governments around the world and basically engaging them with the idea of like it is strategically to your advantage to build AI data centers in your country, compute data
Mm-hmm.
centers. They're effectively incentivizing countries to manufacture more compute on behalf of these providers.
Yeah.
It is genuinely true that certain countries are seeing this as an opportunity to kind of climb the global leaderboard of sort of AI
Yeah.
thought leadership,
Yeah.
while
Yeah.
also having the like pretty obvious business benefit to these LLM providers of bringing more compute online for the
Yeah.
business. But the problems around compute are sort of realized to be a significantly larger bottleneck than they were maybe a year ago. But coming back to my original point, a lot of this also still hasn't changed, which is to say
Yeah.
we feel, I would say, still as a industry,
Yeah.
especially as when you think about the consumer, it still feels like a year ago we were like we're right on the cusp of this, just like kind of working great, but it's not there yet. There's a couple rough
Yeah.
edges.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And in some sense, we're still there. Like if you look at where like AI sort of penetrating into the workplace, like certainly people are using tools, but we're not in this like we're demonstrably 10x or 100x more productive, right? It still feels like we're kind of right on the cusp of it all kind of working together. And we know more on it, but sort of data is coming into that effect sort of at the more macro level. But just
Yeah.
like vibes was, I'd still say it's like it's kind of there, but kind of not there. Um,
Yeah.
and I still think that there are sort of significant challenges as far as these models in general still feel sort of cognitively inefficient, right? I always joke that, like, if you were to ask an LLM in the early days to, like, write you an essay about, say, the history of modern football, right? Like,
Yeah.
the what an LLM would effectively do is they say, like, let's start with like the sum total of everything the human race has ever written down, and then like whittle away everything that's not relevant to like modern football, right? Right? Like that will get you there, right? Right? There's a
Yeah.
pretty mathematically inefficient way to write that thing, right? And then obviously does not reflect like how normal humans would go about such an essay. Um, I think we've gotten a little bit smarter now, or maybe it's like just right, like the sum total of what humanity has written in the 20th century, and then whittled down is sort of mathematically what we're doing now. But it's still kind of a silly way of doing it. So and that's it. Like everything's the same, everything's different.
I hear you. And when I think about the hype that we had around Gemini a year ago and all the investments that were made towards it, you talk about the data centers. I mean, this is tremendous, and I think if you just look at Nvidia and the share price, you see where all the money went. It's crazy. But what I'm wondering is, did any of this actually pay out already, right? When you say kind of things have changed dramatically, but kind of things are the same, and particularly what you say is more or less the same. The question is for me, all the money that went into that, and some companies went humongously into that. Has that paid out? I'm out. I mean, sure, Amazon, Microsoft, Google, they have increased their revenue, their profit. I get it, but is it because of the AI investments, or is it in spite of the AI investments? How do you see that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think the idea of like, has it paid off or paid out is probably a little bit case by case and more nuanced, right? In the sense
Yeah.
of
Okay.
what, like, you could look at what OpenAI has done, right? And say,
Hmm.
just going by publicly available numbers, they recently announced that they've crossed $12 billion in sort of annualized revenue,
Yeah.
gross revenue,
Revenue. Yeah.
started
Yeah.
top
Yeah.
10
Yeah.
revenue, up 12x year on year. If you
Yeah.
last year they're taking
Yeah.
$1 billion annualized. Hard to look at that as a company and say you found $11 billion in revenue. Hard to feel like that wasn't a win on some level.
Yeah.
Right? Like, um, concerningly for me as an investor, they also announced that to get to 12 billion in top line revenue, they increased their spend from 1 billion annualized to 8 billion annualized. So as a business where I'm not just interested in revenue, I'm interested in profitability and margin and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Doesn't feel like a business that's sort of cracked its code yet. And indeed, if you
Yeah.
look at a lot of the broadly adopted consumer AI companies, um, I'm thinking Lovable, Cursor, Windsurf fell into the
Mm.
bucket. It's kind of an open secret that their margins are not sustainable, right? Like it's
Yeah.
0% margins, even negative margins, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, like, I believe AI is sort of valuable in the abstract, and it's obviously something I spend a bunch of time in, but like, selling dollars for 85 cents is a good business. Like that's a good way to make your revenue look really good, kind of regardless of where we're heading in the AI hype cycle.
Yeah.
I have fundamental like anxieties about it as an investor. So
Yeah.
businesses are growing, not in ways which are sustainable. I give them kind of a mixed scorecard there. If you look though at the application layer, there was sort of
Yeah.
a study that came out a couple of weeks ago. I think they announced it in
Mhm.
Fortune, where they announced that 95% of enterprise generative AI pilots are considered a fail, and
Yes.
that they have not
Yes.
achieved positive return on investment. Right?
Yeah.
And if you
Yeah.
dig into it, I mean, the survey is worth kind of reading in its totality, but the big headline that jumped out to me was it wasn't a failure in reasoning, right? Like it wasn't like the models failed to do what they said they could do, but it was a failure to be appropriately integrated into the workplace, right? It's sort of
Mm.
like you've hired a really smart coworker who you just can't figure out how to work with, or something sort of
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that net of it. And I think that that's important because it's sort of like at the end of the day, business. I think you ultimately judge these pilots, these products are the
Mm.
results. The results are not there. Like we should not
Yeah.
shy away from the opportunity or challenge that represents. On the same
Yeah.
side, nothing about that failure indicates it's structurally impossible to achieve the opportunity in AI.
Yeah.
Moving into this sort of like, this isn't all completely BS and nonsense. This is still in the like, we need another couple versions before it really starts clicking.
Yeah.
That's where I stand now. Let's come back in a year and I'll come back for a third episode, and I reserve the right to change my mind. But that's where I'm at so far.
So first of all, yes, you're signed up for August of 2026. Ace, fantastic. But second, what you are describing is then actually not a new issue, not a new problem. There's this. I'm not sure how old it is, but there's this Harvard study to say the reason why technology projects fail is not because of the technology. That just makes 20% of the success.
Right.
80% is change management, is adoption, is knowing what and how to utilize that new technology.
Totally.
And that's what you are describing, right? We are not ready to integrate and work with that new tool, that new capability.
That's right.
Which is very interesting.
And I think it's, I definitely think there's an opportunity for sort of training and upskilling and familiarization with the user. But to be clear, I think the majority of the responsibility lies on the product builder side of things.
Yeah.
And so forgive me if I told you this story last time, but I think a lot about sort of a personal experience I had building AI products where, for those who are familiar, I'm the guy who invented surge pricing at Uber.
Yes.
One of my claims to fame, if you will, my contributions to modern society. And I remember, like, it was one of my early projects. This was like, I was only a couple years out of academia. Mentally, I am very much geared towards like reading research papers, right? Like dense physics language was like not intimidating. And so I remembered we wanted to ship this search pricing product, and I spent all of this time and effort building this model that could like take in supply and demand signals and calculate like the most optimum pricing flow, and like I'm worrying about things like turbulent flow and system utilization and this like abstract physics. And I worked the math to something I really like. Get into production. I'm of course running behind schedule. And so I small company, so I had to build the whole thing, including the customer facing stuff. So I ship a screen in that is just basically a wall of text. Like it commits basically every UI UX faux pas you could imagine. And so like I remembered this first the first couple of weeks we launched it, and so there'd be this little like icon, and then people would request an Uber, and then would say like, "Thank you for participating in the dynamic pricing experiment. Like in times of increased demand vis-a-vis supply, we increase price. Your Uber will be 6.5x higher than normal. We hope that you would." It's like this wall of text that looked like a terms and conditions page, with a really important data point in the middle of that, which is your Uber will be 6.5x larger,
more expensive.
right?
Yeah.
Like you need to be aware of it. Like completely lost, right? And so, but I like, which obviously in retrospect, but at the time we just kind of like shipped it, right? And I remembered we had this. So we looked at the data, and you were looking at like conversion rate as a function of like price multiplier, right? And classic economics would suggest that like as prices go up, conversion rate goes down. We were seeing the inverse. Conversion rates were going up as prices were going up. And so in economics, there's this idea of what's called a Viterbi good, which is sort of, it's a paradox of like perceived value goes up as a function of price. So a classic example of this would be like wristwatches, right? Or they actually did this study with like liquor bottles in nightclubs. Like the really expensive stuff seems even more compelling. And so it was sort of fascinating. I was like intellectually intrigued because it looked like Ubers were Viterbi goods, which was like be problems for our ability to dynamic price, but was like a very cool observation if we'd figured this out. Of like people just wanted Ubers more the more the prices went up. And so like Honda Travis were doing this whole thing on Viterbi goods. And then we realized, like, no, you idiot. Like, what was happening was prices were going up correctly because outside availability of cars was considerably lower. So people's interest in like, I need a car went up, and nobody was reading anything, right? Like it was just basically like it's late at night. you're maybe less than sober. You're just like, I
Yeah.
need a car, like, oh God, no
Yeah.
conditions, like whatever. Well, like we've all just like power clicked through a bunch of
Yeah.
liabilities and disclaimers that we're supposed to read, but we don't read.
Yeah.
And so what we realized was nobody was reading the text. And I was personally responsible the next day for like the highest probability of a customer support ticket was sort of as a function of trips because everybody got their receipts the next morning and is like, I paid what for an Uber, right? And so what we ended up doing is we realized kind of everything I just said was fundamentally true, that I'm terrible at UI UX. And so
Yeah.
we brought in a designer and a front end person, didn't touch a single line of the AI or the line with
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
model. Rebuilt the screen. For those of you who remember, this is when we had the like, there was like a big blue circle and like a multiplier. It's like your Uber will now be like 6.5x, like stupidly large colors and everything. And we immediately inverted customer behavior. Like that was the last big component that actually enabled search pricing to happen. And in terms of like actually being an effective tool to like modulate supply and demand. And so it was a good takeaway, very personal, very embarrassing for me of like great AI wrapped in a terrible product is terrible AI, right? Like, and that was true for search pricing. That will be true for generative AI products, right? The ability to like cover the distance from what the math is capable of sort of informing and what users need to get value out of it is non-trivial and is just as important as the AI when it comes to actually building this.
Yeah. And so when you then take this knowledge that you gained by experience, Kevin, and see the Forbes results, when you speak with your portfolio companies, do they recognize already, or is that recognized, and are the AI startups working on this as well? Has this sunk in? Because that is, as you quite rightly say, a major impact on the mid to long term adoption. Because if the short term adoption fails and companies burn their fingers and lose the money, will they go again? And when will they go? And how far will they go? Right?
Sure. Yeah. So I would say yes and no in the sense that Rackhouse specifically, this characteristic of sort of product knowledge, customer knowledge is a huge part. It's a first order part of what we look for when we diligence companies, when we evaluate companies. Well, our belief, and I will give everybody the candor of just saying I'm speaking to my own biases here, but nevertheless, I hold those biases for a good reason. Is that we think the next wave of AI applications will be won by domain experts and customer experts. So we're actually really looking for teams where we want to find the people we think who are going to build the best product out of every other like-minded team. We want to find the people who know the customers, know how to sell to the customers, know how to find the customers better than anyone else. A lot of it has to do with everything we just covered. That last gap between what the generative AI models are capable of and what users need. The easiest way to bridge it is just, I know it because this is what I would build because I used to be the customer, kind of like that. But I think it's also a really important acknowledgement of sort of the changing of the eras that we've gone through, right? That if you think about like in the B2B SaaS era, I would say a very classic investing playbook was you were actually looking for technical differentiation, right? And the idea being like the breakout team or that team that would be a really good fund returner for you was like those two postdocs from Stanford or Oxford or something like that who wrote that one paper that nobody else has access to. And I think it spoke to a reality of when you think about B2B SaaS, product and sales were pretty straightforward, right? Like that had been de-risked. Everybody kind of knows how to sell a SaaS product. Customer expectations were pretty predictable, right? Like, and so everything product and sales was pretty commoditized, and real alpha was found by having a team that could do that thing with AI that nobody else could do, right? I think we're now in an era where the AI is sort of paradoxically the easiest thing to do, right? Like everybody can have access to
almost commodity.
AI, You pay by the token through an API.
Yeah.
Like they will happily sell you.
Yeah.
And so I think AI is now the commoditized part. Product and sales are the sort of unique differentiated part of either you will build the right thing or you will know the
Yeah.
thing you need to add on top of the API call that nobody else has figured out. And or you know how to sell this better than anyone else. You know how to convince a CIO to adopt a generative AI product that works like so, when every other team that's just like a bunch of AI folks is just beating their heads against the walls of sort of how your company does procurement. You know how to like run that maze because you have that domain expertise. So the idea of saying like we want to find product and distribution oriented folks is not just an acknowledgement of the sort of lived experience and scar tissue I carry, but I actually think it's also fundamentally acknowledgement of sort of we've changed eras from like what is easy and what is hard about
Yeah.
entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Yeah.
That correct? And I think it's important to for everybody to kind of acknowledge that.
Yeah, very interesting. And potentially, Kevin, there's also then a change of who buys the product, right? You were talking about the CIO, and maybe it's no longer the CIO because what you are selling is not the AI, but you sell a solution to a chief procurement officer or
Sure.
to a chief HR officer or to a chief financial officer, right?
Yeah,
Which
I
is
mean, I
then
think there's
a very
definitely a
different
capability
process.
shift. Yeah, where you can sell products with AI at their heart, but is much more sort of seen as a vertical solution. Like this, we regularly work with companies where, for example, like we have a company that helps larger enterprises navigate the relationship with like creative agencies. So we want to figure out a way to like talk to like 150 PR agencies to figure out the best one for us, right? And there's sort of an AI standardization that goes through all of that. And so yeah, like what might have otherwise been selling them a horizontal product is now just sort of seen as much more of a classic tech play. I will say though, the universal thing which is true is, especially if you're selling to smaller enterprise, is regardless of who the buyer persona is, eventually that person has to go to their CFO and say,
Yeah,
hey, we
I
need
need
to spend
money.
some of the company's money on blank, right? And I've
Yeah.
never met a CFO ever who's like, great, sure, take the money, like you're good, right? Like you still need to prep them for that conversation
Yes.
where you're going to
Yes.
say, we want to buy blank, and the CFO is going to be like, that's nice, but no. You're like, no, but
Mm.
really we need blank, right? And here's why X, Y, Z, but. Like
Yeah, that's
that
the case. Yeah.
ability to even just get through that process, especially when it's an
Yeah.
early stage company.
Yeah.
There's a lot of justifiable skepticism
Yeah.
around like this is two guys and like half a product. Why are we buying this? Is a huge
Mhm.
part of like what we coach Rackhouse companies through. It's a big part of we like to find teams where we think they will intuit what to tell the customers, but then you helping them get the last 30% of the way. We have a whole team of venture partners, many focused on go to market. A whole
Mhm.
team of experts and founders now at this point who have run those gauntlets. So it's a big part of what we focus on.
Yeah, and I think this continues to be the direction so that you can really focus on the problems, not on the technology,
Right.
and don't always see a nail because you have a hammer,
Right.
but see the problem for what it is.
Yeah, I mean, there are exceptions like in infrastructure and stuff where the
Yeah,
tech is valuable for its own sake, but especially if
yeah,
you're
yeah,
building applications, like AI is a means to an end, right? Like
yeah,
who is
yeah,
the customer and what is the problem? Huge, a huge part of both how we think founders should think about it, a huge part of what we select.
yeah. Talking about this means to an end, Kevin, I think the latest trend in AI, I would say currently is agentic AI. When we think about agentic AI on the hype scale, where do you think it is? Is it ready for usage, or is it still on a overhyped? Where are we on agentic AI?
Yeah, I still think we're a bit overhyped, right? And so what I mean by this is it was true with sort of regular AI models. It is true with agents that you are trying to apply inherently non-deterministic technology to pretty deterministic problems in terms of saying
Yeah,
like when you ask an AI to like write me an RFP for my company,
yeah,
right? There is a pretty well-established playbook for like how your company prefers to write its RFPs, right? Like there is an outline you follow, there is text, and there is opportunities to freestyle, like, but it's sort of like we want an intro, and then we want a statement of the problem, and then we want like a statement of the characteristics, and maybe their intro, different people like write slightly different intro paragraphs, but the intro paragraph happens initially. LLMs have even with the latest advances, have a non-zero percentage of just completely reinventing. Like they will just write an RFP according to some other company's outline or something, right? It's just the nature of all of this. And so a big part of what every product builder has to handle is like, how do you handle these corner cases where you ask it to write me an RFP and here's my elegant prompt, and I put in like big bold capitals like do not deviate from this, and like, and but even so, 1 in 1,000 times you're going to get an RFP written in Spanish or something, right? How do you handle this?
Yeah.
And so the idea with like agents is trying to take that problem, but into like larger multi-step workflows. So you can imagine if an LLM writes your RFP, an agent is like running your procurement process of like, I'm gonna like write the RFP and then like submit it to a bunch of vendors and receive inputs and then stack rank based on the sort of criteria. And it takes this problem, and even if any sense ups the severity of it, right? Like suddenly your LLM might decide, well, like I hallucinated and wrote a Spanish speaking RFP, and then anybody who responds in Spanish immediately goes to the top of the list or something, right? And you're like, you just sort of like compound stupidity on top of itself. So I think in that sense, some of the intrinsic flaws of LLMs get magnified when you start stringing together imperfect decisions on top of imperfect decisions. That undeniably has to be addressed. The other more fundamental component about this is like, we haven't solved the idea of like memory or institutional context. Like, how do you, even the most simplistic jobs, you think like there's AI like virtual assistants, right, or EAs, or like professional coaches, just like, hey, give me some input on this thing.
Yeah.
And people start to think of them like coworkers, right? It's like or employees. I've hired an AI EA kind of thing, right? That's not cognitively incorrect, right? The idea of like the type of problem you want to give a virtual assistant is almost like, here's the job spec I would have put up if I was hiring an actual assistant. Just can you handle all of this? And some EAs can actually achieve most of what, in a given job spec, but it's kind of like without memory, like every day is your EA's first day. You know what I mean? Like it's like and we've all, I think anybody who's said in executive leadership knows what the process is of kind of breaking in or building familiarity with an assistant. And there's like a period of sort of earnest mistakes that happen. And then there's a period where you realize you thought you were clear, and you realize there was something on your part, you gave bad guidance. So there's kind of a mutual, like we kind of have to meet in the middle. That takes time.
Norming, storming,
And it's a part of the reason why, like, when you find great assistants, it's super common that they like follow people in their careers, right?
Yeah.
AI EAs never have that, right? It's sort of like every day is the first
Day one.
component. And so, like, to create the ability for models to learn, and familiarize themselves and acclimate themselves, a huge like part of the research community's focus right now. We're looking, we invest somewhat in memory as well, like just as a pure investing opportunity. But more fundamentally, it's just like the idea of being able to build an, and even like an information safe way. Just here's how Kevin likes to interact with a model, or when we run an RFP process, there's the officially written playbook, and then there's the like unofficial but equally important
Exactly.
one.
Yeah.
All of that we need to figure out a way to get to an AI.
Yeah. So when you think about, I mean, this is fundamental, right? As you say, because it could be raising quite some quite some difficulties in having agents getting work done. Probably you might need more people overseeing and correcting them than people doing the work. When it comes to that memory topic, where do you see the current level of research on that? Is that something that we say like in a year from now, solved, gone,
Sure.
moving on? Or is this a more fundamental issue that will take some more time to solve?
Sure. I would say right now there are a ton of people working on this, right? It is, yet at the same time, it's probably one of the most like sneaky hard challenges right now in AI. So I don't think it could be more front and center in the building community than it is. Is it solved within a year? Honestly, hard to tell. Part of the reason, so there are sort of 3 or 4 challenges happening all simultaneously that make AI memory really hard. The first is just at the purely technical level, it's an information retrieval problem, right? Like in the sense of, it's analogous to the idea of like, how do I efficiently query a database? This is where you get deeply into like information theory, and like query response time and stuff is a part of one of these things that anybody who spent any time in data infrastructure has just been like grinding on, just how do I get information out of the tech stack as quickly as possible. LLMs and AI agents operate under pretty extreme performance expectations, right? Like I want to be able to have a real-time conversation
Real
with
time,
my
exactly.
AI. So engineering wise is hard.
Yeah.
Second component of this is like, I'm not sure we as a species even really understand how like biological memory works from an editorial perspective. Like, how do you as a human being build like synaptic connections between different ideas in a graph, right? We talk about, like you even think about like we were talking about before this episode started about the vacations we've taken with our kids over this summer. And that's both related to like I went to Disneyland. Memory is related to my own memories of Disneyland. It's related to other vacations I've taken. It's related to memories with the people. Like, how does our brain decide what it is and isn't related? It's not related to like other memories I have had in Anaheim or something, right? So like creating both understanding and then creating the like technical analog for like when you have professional memories or an AI as memory, how do you connect is its own whole area of research. And then the third component is eminently a product problem, which is like most, as I was talking about with like acclimating with a new assistant, most executives look at the idea of like building acclimation with a new assistant with a fair amount of trepidation. Like, oh God, I got to go work with this new person. And it's like, you push through because you know kind of what it's worth, but it is not something most people look at with a great amount of joy. And so like, and so you've got this sort of cold start problem on the AI front, which is like, how do I, as a product builder, somebody selling a widget, like get people over the hump of like, look, you're going to buy my product and it's going to be effectively useless on day one, but like stick with it, I swear. And in 90 days, it'll be great, right? Like that is just an intrinsically challenging sales motion. So you like layer all 3 of those all at the same time. If somebody can crack it, and I know there are teams even out there in the field right now who are making headway on one or maybe multiple axes, huge opportunity. $1 billion plus company, decacorn, 10 billion plus company for sure. Still unsolved though right now.
Very interesting. Let's stay a bit in the topic of flaws or shortcomings, Kevin, because there's something very interesting that you just posted recently about chatbot induced psychosis.
Yes.
How I know it's a flaw, but also it's a hard pivot from what we discussed now. But I found that post extremely interesting. So how did you get to that topic to research and learn about that? I mean, when I read it, it all makes perfect sense, and I had a million light bulbs going up, and I'll definitely make sure to link that post in the show notes. But how did you get there?
Yeah. So just in brief for the audience, if they haven't read my articles, first of all, please do. But secondly,
Yes.
the challenge or the observation I would say is that there's been a marked increase in the observed amount of sort of mental health issues associated with overuse of LLMs, right? And the currently accepted hypothesis as to why is that LLMs, especially GPT 4.1 era models and earlier, but maybe not like the absolute latest ones, but the generation before.
They had some backlash because of
That's right.
being different.
There's a
Yes.
tendency towards being sycophantic, which is to say, like that, like in general, when in doubt, you basically agree with the user, right? And what the hypothesis goes is if you are having paranoid, like if you're paranoid thoughts, if you're starting to have delusions, and you go and talk with an LLM, and LLM confirms those, where you say, "Look, I think." Like, I think I'm hearing voices coming out of the walls. Like, what do I do? And the LLM's like, well, like hearing voices come out of the walls is a super normal thing. So, like, here's what you should do. And like, it just kind of jumps off all of this. Having anybody, it's true whether it's human or not, but having anybody reinforce delusional behavior makes delusions worse, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so to me, I mean, one, this is sort of massive concern, but two, what struck me is that my belief is that the root cause of this is so fundamental to how AI is trained, right? In the sense of in the training community, in the LLM community, there's what's known as reinforcement learning models, which
Yeah.
is to say,
Yeah.
um, effectively, you create a signal where you say an LLM will generate like two potential answers to a question, and then some sort of external function will evaluate which answer is more correct and reward the reinforce, basically steering the model towards this answer. The most common way people do this is reinforcement learning through human feedback. So there are a series of platforms where people can go and they'll have you'll ask a question, you'll get three responses, and then the human being can pick which one they like better, right? And the idea being that this early on was a very powerful mechanism by which researchers could learn how information should be presented, right? So, for example, if you want to ask them like an LLM to build you a recipe to make blueberry muffins, option A might be 6 paragraphs of text. Option B might be an item like a numeric list, and option C might be like a bulleted list. Everyone's like, "Well, I like the numeric, like sequential ordering. That's pretty obvious, right?" What we realized is that human beings, though they will obviously attest to otherwise, prefer sycophantic responses, right? That there is sort of a undeniable preference to LMs being nice and edifying us and saying good things about why, what a good question, and like you like that. Like we just like the dopamine hit that comes from being complimented, even if it's from LLMs. And so that um, human tendency, which you could argue is sort of a flaw, and that it's usually not a character like a personality trait any of us would be proud to say they have, of like, oh,
Yeah.
I love it when people gas me up, kind of thing. Like if whether I've earned it or not, that's not something normal people would normally say. Has like embedded itself, it's literally encoded itself in the math, and now these models are sort of have a predilection towards sycophancy, right?
Yeah.
To me, it's sort of a a very immediate and very concerning symptom of this much more like macro observation around as much as we want these LLMs to sort of transcend human imperfection, we nevertheless, to make them effective in an imperfectly human world, are like we're encoding our imperfections into these LLMs.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know to the extent to which this impacts my day job as an investor, but I think it's philosophically quite interesting. Yeah, I posted another post that is a much different direction, but kind of different facet of this problem, which is like Waymo self-driving cars
Mm.
have this problem in San Francisco where people are much more willing to cut off a driverless car or like block the box. They will like pull out in traffic in front of a driverless vehicle because apparently we seem much more willing to like be a jerk to somebody if there's no human being involved, right? And that is both like interesting and sort of a vacuum, but it's creating significant traffic snafus because Waymos
Yeah.
will like have been coded like do not break the law. Like you don't block the box, you don't drive out of your lane to like go around someone if they're blocking you. And what San Francisco is realizing is to get through rush hour. If anybody's ever done rush hour in a big city, you realize that like most people just to survive are doing like sort of minor traffic infractions, right?
Exactly. You have no chance if you play by the rules.
Right, exactly. If you you're just kind of a sucker. And
Yeah.
it's actually inducing like people are then like pulling out from behind a Waymo who refuses to break the rules and creating
Yeah.
even more severe traffic infractions just because like I gotta get home. And so what Waymo is realizing actually to push a software update to introduce the ability to, in certain situations, Waymos will break the law. Like in a sort of in that classic like minor, I just have to break the rules to get through rush hour sense of the word. And to me, it was fascinating as somebody who was like in Uber in the earliest days of the driverless car thing, where I'm like, this is going to be the introduction of like the end of the traffic accidents. And I still think that's fundamentally true. But it's funny that we
But only at the end state.
totally, yeah. And the other manifestation they had of this was like there's a marked instant increase in. Initially, it was sort of more thought of as homeless people, but pedestrians will just like walk out into traffic in front of driverless cars, knowing that the car will stop. Right? Like there's like I would never do this, but they're seeing this, and so it was like I often had this phenomenon. I sincerely don't hope they do that, but just more as a thought experiment around like, what if Waymo announced a thing that says like, look, 1 in 10 million times, the car's not going to stop, right? Like just if you just knew psychologically that the probability of being hit by a car went from
It's not zero.
to vanishingly small but non-zero, is that enough of like a cognitive gap to convince people like
to make you stop.
Yeah, exactly. Because I'm like, if you know you're not going to get hit, you behave differently from if you're pretty certain you're not going to get hit, but you're not 100% certain. I don't know. Like the actual like tricky manifestations of trying to build AI products in an imperfect world lead you down random paths sometimes.
Amazing. Kevin, I'm not sure if you realize, but time passes always so quickly when you and I speak. So maybe one last question. When we go back to are we building basically LLMs and AI models that are super knowledgeable, but just the most knowledgeable, human flawed machines that are out there? What does that mean for utilizing these models in enterprise work? Like, for example, helping to build a strategy paper, or helping to build the next plan for selling the new product, the next sales plan, etc. Will this have an impact, and will they just try to basically build the plan that they believe you will like versus the best plan that I, as the person not knowing this, expect those models to build?
Sure. Yeah, so I see this a lot. My advice for customers is to the extent you can be significantly less insecure in your ability to articulate your own needs from your business, in the sense of, I think it's very common, even kind of, I sort of detected it in the question around like, if I'm in the business context, I'm evaluating an AI product, it's like not quite there. Like it's sort of like you can kind of see where they're going for. I oftentimes find people who get very nervous around like, well, am I just not using it right? Or like, or am I just too stupid? Like like is all the other customers smarter than me? And like, I just don't want to be like, I'm just kind of a dodo and like nobody. But like, nobody's ever going to be vulnerable enough to tell a vendor, like, I'm not smart enough to use your product. So, like, can you like explain this to me? Like, I'm 5 years old. Like,
Yeah.
I get where that insecurity comes from when you have these like big brain people, when you read these headlines around like,
Yeah.
AI has to happen. The truth is that while there's undoubtedly AI expertise in most of these vendors, the vast majority struggle with product, right? Like, it's part of why we earn returns and select for this as a funding team. If everybody was good at sort of solving customer problems, like, we would not find returns as an investment. So you should, with that corollary to that is as a customer, you should expect most of these products to kind of suck to understand your problem, right? And if it doesn't, then you're really on to something. And so you should negotiate and hold vendors and AI products accountable with a lot of confidence to say, look,
Yeah.
it is your job as a product, as a vendor, to meet me where I am.
Yeah.
And I might be early on in the AI development cycle, but it's like, if I don't understand the pitch, or I don't feel confident about the pitch, then I won't feel confident about the pilot. If I didn't feel confident about the pilot, like, definitely won't be able to sell to my CFO, kind of going back to earlier. So it's kind of like honor that skepticism earlier in the process. For one, you will waste fewer cycles.
Yeah.
And two, you're actually going to be giving the product building side of the table much more useful signal. If you say, look, this sucks, right? Like I get, I believe that you believe you've built an amazing product, but you haven't, and here's why. Like, I wish more customers would do that to my founders, even like in circumstances, because usually these are people who are very earnestly trying to solve the problem in a way which is like plausible but often incorrect, right? It's like rarely, people putting a product in order, like, I'm pretty sure this sucks. Like, they wouldn't be pitching you or selling you as a company if they didn't think what they had was good.
Yeah.
And if it isn't, in a very subjective, just like, this interface is too advanced, or I don't understand these words, or like, you're giving me a chat bot when I just want like a button or something, right? But those kind of really fundamental things. The industry needs to hear it, because like, we are, otherwise we're just going to kind of do a random walk through like product development space until it kind of clicks. And my instinct is a lot of people out there are like, they're thinking things loudly that they're too insecure to say publicly. Like, please tell us, like tell us as builders, tell vendors.
Yeah.
I guarantee it'll go better for everyone else. And as the data suggests, 95% of these pilots are struggling. So if you're struggling out there, you are not in the minority. You are
You're
in
not
the
alone.
majority.
Yeah.
So like, be confident and frankly be demanding. I think it's an opportunity for vendors. They know this ain't it, and it's got to look like this. Otherwise, we're not buying. That'd be better for everybody.
Thank you, Kevin. Amazing conversation. I really enjoyed it. And as I said, I have to be respectful of your time, but time will fly when we speak. I have a million more questions, so we are already set up for number 3. And I'm really curious how the world of AI will look like in a year from now. But for now, thank you so much for your time, and have a wonderful week.
Thank you. I appreciate you coming on.
Bye, Kevin.
Bye now.